We have with us our friend Andy McCarthy of Fox News, where he's a contributor, and National Review, former federal prosecutor in the Southern District for over 20 years. Andy, it's quite a lot to take in after yesterday when Trump announced on Truth Social that he was expecting imminent felony federal charges related to January 6th. Just first off, we wanted to get your 30,000-foot view of this now latest chapter in the Get Trump with the Law saga.
Well, thanks, guys. My view of the substance of the case hasn't changed in the last 2 months. Actually, going back further than that, but 2 months ago, I think is important because the Supreme Court, in two cases involving former, cronies of former Governor Andrew Cuomo, reversed convictions, threw out convictions where the government had tried to stretch the envelope on the vague concept of fraud as it's been distorted in some federal law. And, they really admonished prosecutors not to get creative. That Congress hasn't clearly codified a crime, you're not supposed to bring the crime. And I thought that was a blow to the Trump investigation because to the extent that it's been reported that they wanted to go down the lane of, this vapory concept of conspiracy to defraud the government, or this concept of whether obstruction of Congress was committed corruptly, because we're all allowed to try to influence Congress. The question is whether you do it lawlessly. This is exactly the sort of thing the Supreme Court warned against. Unless you have a fraud that involves a deceptive scheme to get money or traditional property, which means like tangible assets, you don't have a fraud case under federal law. So I really thought that Smith would, instead of bringing an indictment, that he would probably write a report to lay out all the icky stuff that Trump did in connection with the Stop the Steal thing, but not actually bring charges. So it looks like now he's going down the path of bringing charges, and I guess that the timing of it is because he feels like he needs to get in front of Fani Willis, who was the Fulton County prosecutor in the pipeline, because they want to push this case to trial in the next few months. I don't know if they can do it, but if he lets yet another prosecutor get ahead of him in the queue, it's going to be very difficult.
Andy, Buck's been kind of the rain on my sunshine here because I want to get your opinion on this. You prosecuted for a long time, and you're a fabulous guest analyzing all this stuff. But big picture, when you see, and I'm speaking here as a lawyer as well, when you see what is clearly a two-tiered justice system, the likes of which most of us have not ever seen in our life. In other words, we've got an Inspector Javert situation for the Les Mis fans out there where, Trump steals a loaf of bread and he's going to get, they're going to put him in prison for the rest of his life. And meanwhile, it seems quite clear that the Biden family was engaged in all sorts of criminal shenanigans. Nothing happens to the Bidens, and they're throwing the book at Trump. I can't justify it as a lawyer, right? Like, we're supposed to believe that justice is blind. There's a reason why Lady Justice sits there with the blindfold on, with the scales of justice. I am blown away by what Merrick Garland has allowed to happen in this Department of Justice, and by, frankly, what I'm seeing, not as a Republican or Democrat, but just as a lawyer who believes in basic justice for all. Are you?
Not anymore, Clay. I was during the Obama years, but I think that, really for the last 8 years, we've had the criminal justice apparatus of the government leveraged on behalf of Democratic Party politics, whether it was through the Obama Justice Department, the special counsels that pursued investigations against Trump even after it was clear. I mean, when Bob Mueller got that case, they had known for 5 months that there was no Trump-Russia conspiracy. Yet he not only investigated it for 18 months, to that. They continued going back to the FISA court and swearing under oath to stuff that they knew that wasn't true. And this is just the latest iteration of it. I suppose as, you and I are lawyers, we want to believe in the rule of law, but at the end of the day, it's really a body politic. It's not a rule of law society. And I think these guys have learned that the limit of your authority is what you can get away with. And it's raw and it's disgusting, but it's the way it is.
So what do you? I'm sad to say that I agree, and I'm just stunned at how bad things have continued to get. What do you think the motivation is here? So yesterday, Buck and I both argued this is political. That we think that basically the Democrats have decided that this strengthens Trump in the general Republican primary, and they want him as the nominee because they think he's beatable based upon what they saw in 2020. Do you buy into that, or do you think, they're trying to put Trump in prison and keep him from being able to run? What's the actual motivation here from your perspective?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I've been saying for well over a year that that's exactly what's going on, and people told me I was crazy at the beginning, but look, the way the criminal justice system works, it tees up exactly for what the Democrats want to accomplish here. The indictment will get people who are the base of the Republican Party. It's party bases that elect candidates in a primary cycle. It's going to get them all whipped up. It already has. So that not only does Trump go up every time one of these Democratic prosecutors indicts him, and obviously if they thought it was bad for them, they wouldn't continue doing this, right? We're talking about 3 different Democratic prosecutors right now. Every time they indict him, not only do his numbers go up among Republicans, it completely freezes the other candidates. Instead of developing their own connection with the party and with the public, they're reduced to all the time having a comment on what's going on with Trump. So this plays great for the Democrats to the extent they want to get Trump nominated. And then what happens down the line in a criminal prosecution is, you have hearings, and then you have a trial, and then all the evidence comes out. And now you're playing to a different audience because nationally, Trump has never been nearly as popular as he is with his own base. I mean, he won he was in 2 elections where he topped out at 46%. So he's already got a lot of people who are against him. Now, when you get to the trial phase of these things and the hearing phase, that's when all the evidence comes out, and it's going to reconfirm in people's minds the things that they didn't like about him in the first place. So it helps him get nominated, and it will assure that he gets defeated in November.
Andy, can I ask you about the timing of all this as well? Because we think that's a really important component here.
Yep.
Are they, I'm sure the Trump team so far with the South Florida, there's so many prosecutions. We have to keep like a bulletin board up in our respective radio studios here. But with the South Florida prosecution, the strategy is going to be to delay that, right? Meaning the Trump defense attorneys are trying to delay it. Let's say Jack Smith comes out with incitement to insurrection, and he goes for the top possible count, he's taking the biggest shot possible here. Is it realistic in your mind that a D.C. judge now is going to allow him to delay, meaning the Trump defense team to delay this until after the election entirely? Like, how do you see that happening? I mean, because to me, if the elections are happening and there are multiple criminal trials that have all been pushed to beyond 2024, that causes its own problems too.
Yeah, it would be very hard to get this case rapidly to trial, Buck, if this was the only thing on Trump's dance card. But he's not only got the New York prosecution already scheduled for trial in March with pretrial hearings starting in December. Much overlooked, I think, is the fact that he's got a civil fraud trial also in New York from the Attorney General there, Letitia James. That starts on October 3rd. Now you have the problem of Smith, which is a self-created problem. He brings a classified information-laden case in Florida, which means he's under the Classified Information Procedures Act, where you basically have to have a pretrial trial of the trial. The judge has to rule on all the classified information issues prior to trial, which takes a lot of time because you got to get people cleared. You have to pry the evidence away from the intelligence community. It's not just the evidence that the government wants to bring in, but whatever evidence the defense wants to bring in, which tends to be a lot more than the government wants to let the jury know about. So those are very complicated issues. They take a long time to work out. And now you have what would be a complicated issue if it was the only thing we were talking about, which is the indictment of a former president of the United States on a theory that he tried to influence the Congress, which you're allowed to do unless you engage in lawless activity. And it's a very complicated case. I don't think he's going for incitement to insurrection because the Justice Department has taken the position in all the other January 6 cases that Trump wasn't involved in the violence, didn't command the violence, is not an unindicted co-conspirator in any of those cases. So they're going with this complex theory that in relying on John Eastman's dubious legal theory, he was corruptly trying to influence the Congress and deceive the public and deceive the government with respect to the electoral count. I don't think that's the kind of thing the Supreme Court thinks is a federal crime. Congress could make it a crime if they could articulate something specific enough, but they haven't. So I think there's going to be a lot of litigation in this case. And even if Trump didn't have all these other things going on, it would be very hard to get this case scheduled for trial anytime soon with all the motion practice that has to happen.
So wait, so just to be clear, Andy, so all the federal charges then that are brought currently and prospective, you think they may not be formally, officially adjudicated. He may not have to face a jury of his peers until after 2024 is decided. Is that where you are?
Which means it'll never. His best shot, Buck, is to win the election, or for a Republican to win the election after the charges against Trump and the weaponizing of the Justice Department have been made an issue in the election. And all this stuff about can Trump pardon himself or will Trump be pardoned, it's nonsense. If the Republicans win the election, the Republican attorney general in the next administration will simply dismiss the cases if they haven't been tried. So that's at least the federal cases. They'll just disappear. That's his best shot.
I want to make sure we don't pass on what's the testimony that's going on right now from the IRS whistleblowers. You know this, Andy, and I'm curious if you've ever been involved. Mary Ellen Noriega is the judge in Delaware who has to sign off on Hunter Biden's plea agreement. Based on all the evidence that has come out surrounding the investigation, the allegations that the investigation was not properly undertaken, that it was restricted, that there were opportunities to bring charges that were rejected, do you think this judge on, I believe it's July 26th, should sign off on this plea agreement, or should she not refuse to sign off on it based on all this sturm and turmoil surrounding it? And if she did refuse to sign it, what would happen next?
Well, I think there's a middle position, Clay, and it seems to me that what she can do, what I think I would do if I were the judge, is I'd have a lot of questions about why things were done the way that they were done and why the government elected to do the things it did, how it can say that it did so in the interest of justice when, for example, by slow-walking the case, which is a fairly simple, straightforward case, but by slow-walking it the way they did, they actually lost counts that were some of the most important counts in the case. They lapsed because of the statute of limitations. And from what I heard so far in this hearing, the defense was willing to extend by agreement the statute of limitations, but the prosecutors allowed it to lapse. If I were a judge, I'd have some pretty significant questions about that. So what I anticipate is going to happen next week is we may not have a plea proceeding at all. Rather, I think the judge is probably going to have some tough questions for the Justice Department and require them to answer them publicly.
So you don't think Hunter is totally out of legal jeopardy in your mind? Is that fair to say?
It's not all. If every plea agreement says that it's up to the judge whether to take the plea and what sentence to impose. And if the judge conveys to Hunter Biden that, I understand that you've made this agreement with the government, which looks like, pretty lenient on the sentencing guidelines. And then I'm looking at this and it looks to me like these should have been felony charges. And I kind of don't understand why they weren't, and I'm not bound by this agreement under the sentencing guidelines. Every agreement says that it's up to the judge to take the plea, and it's up to the judge what sentence to impose. And if a defendant pled guilty thinking the judge was just going to be a rubber stamp, and it turns out the judge isn't, defendants get give second consideration to whether they ought to be pleading or not. So it's not over till it's over. It's not over till she accepts the guilty plea and schedules a sentence.
Andy McCarthy, everybody, look for his latest on National Review. Andy, when are you going to write another book? I know you're busy.
When they stop making me busy.
All right. Fair point. I hear you. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you being with us.
All right, guys. Thanks.